2020 audience. Welcome to the 2020 series presented by the New York Film Academy. The 2020 series are creative collaborations and storytelling between myself and creative visionaries from all sorts of walks of creative, film, music, life, and people that we want to talk to, hear about, and how are they dealing with things in the world. We're going to do 20 minutes of shop talk, and then we'll have 20 minutes of answering questions from you, the global audience. So please chime in. We'd love to hear what you're thinking. And I am Liz Hinlein, creative director and filmmaker. And today I am so pleased and excited to have Joanna Bowzer, who is an amazing filmmaker and a content entrepreneur. And we're going to break that down for you of what the frig is that. Hey, Joanna.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for showing up. So full disclosure, people, is that I took an amazing course with Joanna and her film launch company. And I felt that it was so effective, and it was such a change of gears for me. What was really astounding is the idea of treating myself like a startup business, treating being a filmmaker like a startup. And I just like to talk to you, Joanna, about where the idea came from and how you sort of have been like, you know, making that like really be such a powerful communication with people.
Sure. So the idea of treating yourself as a filmmaker as a startup, and actually my career started in technology startups, digital media startups. I've been selling content and selling products online since 2003, which, to give you some reference, that's when YouTube was founded. So it's been a long time. It's before Vimeo. It's before, you know, all these places that sell content online now. And so I've been in that conversation for a long time now. Back then it was like ebooks and how to lose weight and all of this. And I was in that world, and our mission was to empower experts to sell their content online so they had new ways to generate revenue. And then about 10 years ago, I pivoted out of pure startups and then became a filmmaker just because I was ready for a shift, frankly. And I would always love telling stories and was in theater when I was younger, moved to New York to be an actor, but had pivoted out of it. So I went back into filmmaking, but I came to it with this whole new approach of being that entrepreneur, you know, that entrepreneurial spirit, and having that to support and using the tools and the training and the things I learned working at startups, from business development to marketing. I was also doing production at the startup, but it was really the business development, the marketing, the operational strategies that really helped me propel forward much more quickly as a filmmaker, because I looked at it differently than a lot of the other filmmakers people were coming across and meeting. So an example I'll share with you, Liz, is my very first interview to be hired as a writer. Sorry, maybe my second, but to be hired as a writer. I did get hired as a screenwriter into the room. And then as part of that conversation, I went ahead and made the request, hey, I also want to be a producer on this, because I knew I wanted a feature film producer credit. And the producer was like, and I said, and I created, the opportunity of me was, I have all this business experience. I was lucky. I was in a position where I was like, I don't need to get paid on this one. So I'm very happy to sort of like get the sweat equity, because I'd saved up and I was still actually working part-time. And she said, oh, okay, you know, sounds good. And then 2 or 3 months later, as we were walking down the line in the writer's room, there were 4 of us working on it as a writing team. There was a point where she had seen a short film I had made, my very first short film. She said, that was wonderful. Do you want to direct this feature film? And I was like, absolutely. But I was really direct with her. I was like, look, I've never directed a feature. I didn't go to film school, but I know how to build a team, because I've been an entrepreneur. I've worked in, you know, this company that was a startup. So I brought that spirit into building the team and surrounding myself with the best people I could cast in the roles, DP, production design, etc. So I knew how to do that. So while I was developing my voice as a filmmaker, I did know I had all of this entrepreneurial business experience to bring into it. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's a kind of an example of like how I was able to accelerate because of that background. And I was like, there's really something here. If you really look at yourself as a company, or as a business, as a startup, you approach it differently. You actually make different decisions, different choices in your experience of doing business. You create partnerships in a different way. So I was like, okay, this is a bigger conversation I want to have with people, not just, kind of keep it to myself, but actually like start to share it with other people and start to shift that perspective and that mindset in that way.
And so talk to me a little bit more about, so that there's like the traditional filmmaker, like I'm, you know, Joe MacGyver filmmaker out there doing my thing, craft, knowing my thing, and then hustling to get jobs or writing my own thing or going to get money. How is it coming at it as a startup different?
Sure. Well, if you come at it as a company versus sort of a one person band,
Mhm.
so that's one thing to think about, is sort of say, okay, if I were going to build this project as a company, who are the different departments that I need? So it's kind of the same, but it's not just about the creative. So the creative is the product, but a
Right.
startup has many departments that you need to put in place, as a filmmaker for yourself. And
Mhm.
this is, let's think of, you can think about a project as a startup, but you can also think of your career as a startup and say, okay, like if I'm a business, right? And
Mhm.
my work is the product, well, what else do I need to support that? Well, I need marketing.
Mhm.
Okay, so I need to think about marketing. I need to think about finding customers, whether that's to buy my films when they're made or to hire me. Those are both customers, right? I also need to think about operations, like what am I doing? How am I setting myself up financially, so that
Mhm.
like a business, I'm making sure that I'm taking profit first. I'm maintaining fiscal responsibility. I'm making business choices in my finances. Maybe I have a partner that I work with because I recognize, hey, I don't want to deal with the operations. I'm not interested in the operations of filmmaking, the operations of business. So I'm going to find a great producing partner to work with that's interested in those things, that can be my counterbalance, kind of my co-founder, if you will.
Right.
And so it just starts to reshape your perspective in a way and moving forward. And it allows you, the other thing about being in a startup, and this is something that's very widely known in the startup sphere, maybe not so much in the film, is this process of iterating. So
Mhm.
rather than focusing on R&D for a long time, for years and years, like a pharmaceutical company might, a startup will put something out and then iterate and learn and
Mhm.
grow and build an audience and iterate again. And so I'm not saying you're going to release your film multiple times, but you may not start with a feature. You may say, okay, let me do these little content pieces. So this may sound familiar to the filmmakers in the room. Like, let me do these little content pieces and learn. What do I like? Okay, now I'm going to make that short film or that web series. And with my web series, my goal is not to generate revenue. My goal is to generate notoriety. So I want as many people to see it as possible so that I can get that investor on my feature. So it's not so much like, I'm not saying anything that's necessarily like changing the game in that way. I'm just bringing a container to it so that it makes sense and it doesn't just feel like you're flailing around. It's like, oh, there's actually a process and we can learn from the startup world what that process can be. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And that's super interesting because it takes it out of being, and we've talked about this, of being like the artiste, basically. And then it's all about ego and craft and a lot, and everything becomes so precious,
Mhm.
it sounds like.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes for, work that I've done, like in the VR or the new media world, where it is about, you've got to, they call it play testing. You got to
Mhm.
play test. You got to make something and play test, because that's where you're going to find your answers to, which it might be like, making a few shorts of your feature. You don't
Mhm.
have to, like, it seems to me there's always that concept, at least with where I grew up with the filmmaking, is it's this one hill that you climb up and then you get to the top and then you're on the
Right.
top and then you do stuff and then you're Spielberg at the top doing Spielberg things.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
as opposed to
Whereas,
cross-platforming.
yeah, cross-platforming, and also thinking about another startup concept is the concept of your minimum viable product.
Hmm.
So let's say you have a script, and what's the minimum viable product from that script that you can start to showcase and put into the world? So that could be a short,
Hmm.
that could be an audio drama version, that could be a table read for 50 people. So you start to get their feedback, right? So it's like, what's the minimum viable product that you can put out? And then maybe you can iterate there. I mean, I do a ton of table reads, and I think part of it's because I really like to hear things more than read. I'm just an oral learner.
Mhm.
But the other reason is I want to hear, I'd like the opportunity to workshop to the product
Right.
script and then iterate, but not just in my head where I get, stuck and frustrated. I'm with other people because that's where the work lives. It lives in the
Right.
audience feedback and how they play with it, whether it's a widget, whether it's a website, or whether it's a story, whether it's a film. And so that's another start of things, like what's that minimum viable product that you can put out there to start to engage an audience with, so you can learn what that is. And that may pivot you off of that project into something else. Sometimes that happens. Or that you just iterate that project until it finally is that feature film that's ready to go to Tribeca.
Right. Right.
But rather than cooking it in your own kitchen, you share it along the way, right?
That seems to me, Joanna, um, those mindsets, especially with like all the socials, that became even the last 5 years really your brand
Mm-hmm.
and concretizing like what you're selling. And then you only, and what I think is really great right now is that you don't have to be one thing. Like, what are you? What do you do? You like, it's, everybody seems to like, do you agree that like the hyphens or the slashes or I'm this and this?
Slashies are all the rage. Yeah. And I think it's because we're in a multimedia world. So we want multi hyphenate creators. We want people that, I mean, we do, look, you always need a specialist, right? I would say the position of your DP, even though there's a lot of people that cross over director DP,
Mhm.
um, I even know some DPs that are wonderful writers, and editors. But when you're when you're cast as DP, when you're hired as DP, you really have to be a specialist,
Mhm.
as the DP working with your director, right? So you're always going to need specialists. But I do think at the creator level, no matter what you're creating, being a multi hyphenate or just understanding the other roles is key at the very base level, right? But if you do them, it's even more interesting. And I think a hyphen or a slash that everybody has to have is even if you're not a marketer, because look, not everyone wants to be a marketer, but you have to have some understanding that this is a product, or even kind of your product. Like I know you're not a can of Coke, but you still have a brand, you still have a value proposition in the marketplace.
Mhm.
And the function of your ability to communicate that is how the marketplace will, engage with you. And that can be casting directors, that can be production companies that are going to give you money, or investors,
Mhm.
that could be commercial companies that are going to hire you. So it's just thinking about it differently, and not, and part of the mindset work that I do as well is like not getting tripped up by that
Mhm.
it's not like, it is a thing, but it's not all of you. Like I have a brand, but I am not my brand. I am still Joanna, and I have all these nuances, but I do have a brand that when I'm speaking in the world, I speak to it, in different ways. So it's just understanding that.
And so talk to me about your brand and how you actually sort of, you know, got into the juicy center of it and figured that one out.
Sure. So and this is something, Liz, that'll sound familiar because of the course that you went through, but I always start with, what do I want? Like, what's the thing that I want?
Mhm.
And my thing that I want is, I truly believe that if you can transform content by lifting up underserved voices and empowering them, you can transform society. Like, I am not messing around. Like, I truly, truly believe that. So for me, thinking about that and what I create and what I produce and who I support, and then the education component, like that to me is where I started, is like, what, and it doesn't always have to be altruistic. We've talked about this, Liz. Like, I'm not saying like everybody has to be out to like
Right.
transform the world, but it's like you have to know what you want or what your vision is holistically for your career. Some people's like, I want an Oscar. It's like, great. If you want an Oscar, but you're directing these small little projects, that may not fit, right? So like, I want to direct Star Wars, but
Mhm.
when I look at my body of work, I'm directing these like dark comedy, like indie ensemble cast pieces. And it doesn't make sense, right? Like there's not a bridge
Right.
to Star Wars in that way. So there's two choices I can make. I can either refocus my want
Hmm.
to being maybe more of a Nora Ephron or having that kind of career, or I refocus my brand and what I'm taking on project wise towards Star Wars.
Right.
And that can impact the work I create, the people I collaborate with, the
Mhm.
types of projects I, maybe take on. It can impact my social media, how I'm talking in the world about different content. Maybe I don't, but I could be sharing more about like, Star Wars and science fiction and my opinion about how to change it and the
Mhm.
female gaze versus the male gaze. I mean, I could be doing all of this on my
Right.
social media. So that's how you can sort of get into like, what do you want? And then take a look at what you have and see where there's a breakdown and then start to shift. And if you don't like social media, that's cool, but there's ways to reach out and create a community that you're engaging with to put that brand out there.
And how would one reach out without social media and that it's so predominant now and it's so almost expected?
Sure. I mean, the thing I would say is it could be, maybe it's not Instagram, but maybe you're really deep in the Reddit community,
Hmm.
right? Maybe you join online communities like Film Independence in person, but there's online communities of filmmakers that you engage with so that you uncover and discover potential partners, potential collaborators. So, so that's social media, but it's not the like influencer look at me goal. It's the networking goal, right? So you can use those types of tools to really go out there without having to be flashy and having to be perfect and pristine, and you don't need to be Kendall Jenner, right? To be able to engage with people and build a community. And so that's the first place. Once we, virtual festivals or film festivals in person, like if you have a film that can go to festivals, you should, and you're getting in, you should go to as many as you can afford. And like a festival strategy to start would be go to the ones you can drive to, because that way you're at least getting out there and you're engaging with people, and that's part of your brand too, who you are. There's a really great filmmaker um, whose film Last Call just blew up over the festival circuit last year. I think his name is Gavin Michael Booth, and he went to every festival.
Hmm.
He is, no kidding, one of the nicest filmmakers people I've ever met.
Right.
And he like made it his brand is like, I'm out there, I'm supporting you. Oh, what's your film? What's the time? He writes it down. He goes, so it's like his brand, like I automatically want to help him. If he threw up a crowdfunding campaign tomorrow, I'd be like, where do I send my money? Because he was so supportive, because his brand is like, no, I'm out to like make a difference for independent film. Again, altruistic doesn't have to be. Not
Right.
that he was like, he wasn't saying that to me, but I was like, oh, I got it. You support your crew, your community.
Hmm.
So I want to support you. And so that's his brand, right?
Right.
Now he's not, again, it's not tattooed on his t-shirt, right? But that's what he does. He lifts up other filmmakers, he supports them, he goes, and people want to support him in return. So that may not be your thing, but you're going to have your thing that you can as a way to express that. Does that
Totally.
make
And
sense, Liz?
it totally makes sense. And it was interesting in that communication is also the idea, in the filmmaker selling yourself, networking, all those things have sort of bad connotations in a way. And what I'm hearing you say is the filmmaker or the networking as collaboration, as
Partnership.
community,
Hmm.
partnership.
Yeah.
Um, I know you have like, I forget, you have like a phrase or something about community and partnership that you said to me, but I can't remember what it was.
I mean, my, and this kind of goes back to like my belief that like your career is only as big as the request that you make,
Mhm.
right? But always the request is made through the partnership or through the opportunity of partnership or collaboration or connection, not through like I need this.
Mhm.
So like it's an opportunity for the other person as well. And so like I'm very big on partnership. It's like that is where, and I'm not saying you have to, like, we're not all like on the yellow brick road together making a movie, but there's partnerships, and you could meet a group of filmmakers that you create a promotional pod, if you will. And
Mhm.
like when you each have something come out, you each share it with your networks and be like, hey, I love this filmmaker, check out their new short, check out their new web series. And you could create partnership that way, even if you're not collaborating with them on set, right? Especially
Totally.
for folks that are in communities of directors, like we're all directors, so we need like, you know,
Well,
so,
as opposed to we're all competitors, or there's
correct.
only
Absolutely.
one of us can win, or stuff like that. And I did want to, we
1000%.
talked about it earlier. I would love you to tell me again how you a thing called bold requests. I think this is
Yeah,
a great nugget for people to listen to and walk away with.
sure, sure. So what a bold request is it's making a request, so asking for something
Hmm.
in a way that leaves the other person really aware of the opportunity that it is for them, right? So it's not a favor. Favors are things, like favors are favors. It's not like a demand, like you got to come do this thing, right? But it's a request that leaves somebody present to the opportunity for them. So let me give you an example. So if I'm trying to raise money for a film, right? I could go and ask 100 people for money,
Hmm.
and a lot of that sometimes shows up as this very like awkward conversation of like, will you
Right.
give me my money because I'm kind of cool, right? As opposed to, hey, I have a film about X.
Hmm.
You're a person who is interested in X. So by participating in this project, there's a real opportunity for you to elevate what you're up to as well.
Hmm.
Or I work in the film industry, you think it's sexy, do you want to be associated with this? That's also an opportunity for somebody, right? Like I had a holiday film, a series of holiday films, and we were like, should we go to like Texas and like go to all the oil people and be like, like the heads of the companies that are predominantly men and be like, do you want to buy your wife an EP credit on this Hallmark movie? That's an opportunity for them.
Hmm.
Now, we didn't do it, but it's an opportunity, right? So I can break down the kind of the steps to take, and this
Hmm.
is not intended to be manipulative, it's just the things to check in on as you think about how you can ask people for things. So the first step is you really want to get very clear what your intention is in the conversation. So you don't want to walk in, unprepared or haphazard, not understanding. Now, sometimes I always say my intention is to create connection and partnership.
Hmm.
So no matter what happens with the conversation, I know that if that's there, we win. We're good,
Right.
right? So the first is get clear on the intention. And then the next thing is to go into the conversation or in advance in an email, get related to the person. So you want to get in there with them. It's not about you, it's about them. What are they up to? What are they interested in?
Hmm.
What's going on for them, right? So you want to get in their world. And it's really important to get in their world because once you start to get in their world, you can start to see where the opportunity might be in their eyes.
Right.
So once you're related, what you want to do is um, you want to understand what their pain point is. So, what is the thing they need? Now, sometimes, like if you're reaching out to an agent as an actor, it's like, what do they need? Well, they need people on their roster, right? They need to make money. So, you might
Hmm.
want to talk to, or they may be busy. Like sometimes it's like, I'm busy, so you can make it very easy for them. So, what do they need? What is their, what's missing for them
Hmm.
that you can then create yourself or your project as an opportunity to fulfill that pain point. But the gap here is you want to acknowledge what's missing or their struggle, and then you want to be like, how magical would it be if this struggle was gone? So you want to give them a view of the future of
Hmm.
the struggle being gone, right? Now it's not always a struggle, their pain point, their need, their want. And then you present yourself, your project, your script as the conduit to
Hmm.
that magical possibility world. And so you break this down in that way so that when you go to make the request, now they're excited, they're with you, they see the opportunity, and your request is super simple. It's a yes or no question.
Right.
It's not what do you think? It's
Hmm.
not let me know your thoughts. It's, would you like to invest? Or even better, would you like to invest $100,000?
Right.
Right? So it's a yes or no question, because, and this is a psychological thing. It's because if you ask a yes or no question, the brain automatically answers it. So let's just a little experiments like, hey guys, what do you think of my hair today? Well, there's
Hmm.
lots of opinions about that, right?
Right.
But it's like, hey, do you see my hair? I was like, yeah, I see it. Okay, great. Like, right. So it's just your brain automatically answers yes or no.
Hmm.
And then they can very easily make their choice without any sort of consternation. And you got to give them space to do that. You can't be like, no, what, right? You got to give them space. But then they can make that choice. And
Right.
then you can make the follow up plan as you need to based on what they say. And sometimes they say no and you be with it. You're like, awesome. But because you've been creating partnership, that's great. Hey, can I call you another time? Is this not the right fit for you? Or do you know people that are investing in holiday movies? Let's go. Yeah, great. You know, so now you can start to dance with them more. So I just like that sort of process. And you can do this for raises, by the way. You can do this for, having people join your team, for casting, for anything that you want. You can use this process and really break it down and then go in really empowered to make a very clear, crisp request that will hopefully get a yes, but at the very least creates partnership and opportunity. So they know that you're professional and you're somebody that they may want to work with in the future, if not right now.
So how is the sales point when you're saying this is your opportunity not feel like a sales pitch?
Sometimes it does, first of all. So just sometimes you got to get comfortable with that. So I don't want to be weird, but if you've done your work to really understand the person you're talking to really get in their world, to really understand their pain points, to really understand what they might want,
Mm-hmm.
and really understand how your whatever you're selling is a fit for them, the request is quite easy.
Mm-hmm.
And the real thing is like have them do most of the talking. Like really, like
Yeah.
it's you're asking questions, you're letting them create the conversation, and maybe you're mirroring back, to ask another question, but let them drive it. You'll see if there's an opportunity for you to make the request. Now, sometimes you also want to be clear that you may make a request, right? You
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be squirrely. Like you don't want to come in and be like, I wasn't going to ask you for money, but now I am. Like that's
Right.
gross, right? Or whatever. Like you want to be very clear if you are making a request. So being direct about that can also be very powerful because people want to work with people that are direct, that are clear, that are professional, right? They don't. It's so here's a great example. Like Liz,
Mm-hmm.
will you invest $1 million in my next feature film?
No.
Right. There's nothing going on for me around that
Right. Right.
because because one, it's like, okay, great. It doesn't mean it's like I don't know why you're not going to do it. Probably because you have your own features you would invest in if you could. But there's nothing going on. So it's really about just like being in the conversation and being with the person and not having it mean anything about you. It's just a no, and there's 1,000 other people you can ask for money
And that's
or work.
totally, and that's the thing about, for artists, the tricky thing is, especially if you're an actor, so you're selling yourself or you're the product or your film is the product or something that you put your blood, sweat, and tears in is the product. How do you work with the no or the fear of the no?
So, what I would always say about working with the fear of the no is to practice the pitch a lot of times with somebody who loves you and have them say no to you a lot. So you actually get the sensation of that. You actually can learn how to process that sensation. So that's one thing. And pitches change depending on who you're talking to. So do your best, but just like get used to that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this is going to sound very, very cheesy maybe, but here's the thing. LeBron James, top athletes do this type of thing. Take some time if it's a really big pitch or a really big request, like, and visualize yourself going through it and receiving the yes. And like being really crisp, work the process, make the request and get the yes, and practice that certainty principle so that you can walk in and have confidence that this person could be a yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people are talking as if they're ready for somebody to reject them or say no. But you got to practice this. You can't just be like, oh, turn it off. Like you have to practice this principle. I'm very confident because I did business development for 10 years
Right.
in a startup. So I got a lot of yeses and I got a lot of nos, and I got super clear that it wasn't about me.
Mm-hmm.
So I had that practice. So you have to give yourself, even if you don't have it in practical world, you can give yourself that practice with your community, people that you trust. Always do it with somebody who loves you so they can hug you or, like give you a high five after. but do that, and then in your mind practice, like, what is it that, how would you be if you were talking into a yes, you knew that person was a yes, like practice it that way.
Right. And that's the whole thing we've talked, like you're going to present yourself differently,
Yeah,
standing tall. If you think, okay, this is going to be a yes, and it's going to be a big yes, as
yeah,
opposed to, oh, it's going to be a big no, then I'm not going to be in my
yeah,
power, basically.
yeah.
Um,
And I got that. I did an exercise with somebody, and the exercise was really funny. It was like, ask for, it was and I was practicing asking for money to raise
mhm.
money. And I did it. Like, and then the exercise was, the person acted out back to you what you look like, with like a 10% like hyperbole,
Right.
just a little bit joking, but like, and I was like, is that what I look like? And they were like, kinda, you look really uncomfortable. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna work on this, because I would want to invest in that person.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, it's just, that confidence is just it's a practice of like just certainty and working with people, and like just kind of getting, and it took time. It
Totally.
wasn't an overnight shift. Now I did have an overnight shift from that to the next time, and I kept getting better because I was so clear what was going on, but it wasn't, my effectiveness didn't go up for another year or so, and being able to really convert into fundraising conversations.
Totally. I'm going to jump in. There's a bunch of questions,
Yeah.
and it sounds fun. Angela Lee asks, if you are just starting out in film media, how do you find collaborators and partners when you don't have much to offer yet?
Sure. So, one of the interesting things about collaboration is a lot of people look, if we're all on a great ladder in the industry, a lot of people try to look many, many rungs higher than they are.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you can't hop in an elevator and go to the top. I'm not saying that. But if you're looking for collaborators, the best place to start to look is right around you in your classes, right around you in, in the communities. But you want to work with people that are right about at your level, maybe one or two rungs higher. I hate to use the hierarchy metaphor, but it's kind of the best.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do that as you start to create collaborators, and then you'll start to rise together. It'll be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is just keep that in mind when you start to look at collaborators. Okay. So the second piece of it is, and I don't know where's Angela based. Does it say?
Um, no,
Okay.
but
It's just depending, there may be something where you need to do some research. If you're local, there may be a film community to just get plugged into. Just get plugged into, if they have meetings, if there's a local film festival, start to volunteer, start to get, start to reach out to people and say, hey, I'm here. I just want to, like, I'm looking for collaborators. I'd love to meet with you, and just start locally where you are. And then you can do that online and offline. And even if you don't have anything to offer, you always have yourself to offer. I know that sounds weird. There's a weird way to say that, but like, people are always looking for support. They're always looking for, if you are able to work on a set, maybe you can PA for a few days just to get exposure and start to create relationships with people on that set. And so don't forget that, there's different types of, equity, right? Different types of labor, and some of it is sweat. And maybe your first thing that you can offer is your sweat equity in somebody's project, to build up that relationship and to see if this is somebody that you want to continue to work with. And so I would start local, both online and offline. Start going to, if they have meetups and things like that, definitely start there, and then start to see where you can offer your services or yourself to support their work as you start to meet people. And at that point, usually you start to get some momentum in the collaborator creation. And the thing about collaboration to also keep in mind is, like, it's like dating. You do not, like, you may not find your first people right out the gate. You may have to, keep
a
looking
lot of
around and
drops.
keep checking people out. So, but using that technique, those networking techniques, is where I would start to do that.
Totally, 100%. So Jean and Nancy Kopowski, I'm going to just bastardize your last name. Sorry, guys. Love what you're doing. Agree with the approach 100%. Reminds me of what George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola did back in the early 70s. Essentially, this is putting the producer hat on first rather than the auteur beret.
I'm going to steal that phrase, a tour beret. I love it. It's so visual. I love it. Absolutely. I mean, like, the producer hat is important. Yeah. And I probably steer a little I'm pretty heavy into the like personal branding producer, like that world. And there's people on the other side that are like, do a little bit. And I'm like, it's perfect because, you know, we sort of like balance each other out in the industry. But definitely thinking as a producer first, not as a producer, like breaking down the budget, breaking down the schedule, but just sort of as the owner of what you're doing. And the CEO, by the way, of a company is not doing all the minutia necessarily. So just because you may be an auteur-esque filmmaker, that doesn't mean you can't look at this as a, you know, as an entrepreneur. But you got to know, like, hey, like, if you're not going to do the finances, if you're not going to do the budget, you're like, I don't want to touch that stuff. That's cool. But then you got to know that's where you want to find partners. You want to find those collaborators. So that's the thing to really keep in mind.
Totally, exactly. And Jordan Walton asks, when you look at projects, what is the thing you see that has the quote unquote it factor?
Sure. So I personally look for three things on the producing side, or even on the directing side, really. But starting on the producing side, I from script stage, I wanted immediately, or with a very, you know, with a little bit of work, be able to identify the audiences. And I'm not talking like everybody between 18 and 50 will like my film. I'm talking about like, who are the target avatar customers for your film? So if I can't see that in a script, it's too broad, it's not crisp, I may not take it on. And that's another way you can also understand your budget level. So if your target avatar customer base is only 10,000 people, and we know that of the 10,000 people, probably 1% will buy your film, maybe because of all the platforms like that, you can start to back out your budget by that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I always look for a real I really like working on projects that take audiences on a, you know, a very impactful journey. But my special secret sauce there is I like films that are like they treat the audience like the frog in the pot of water that slowly starts to boil, and then they sort of look around and they're like, how did this happen? Like the shit's hitting the fan, and they're like, they're loving it, and it's sometimes absurd. So I look for scripts that sort of follow that arc personally. That's just an aesthetic choice as a producer and as a director. So I love that sort of storytelling, whether it's a comedy or a drama, kind of doesn't matter. They tend to be dark comedies or comedies more than dramas, because at some point that like a drama that does that is like really intense. So that would be the second thing. So the immediate ability to identify the target audience. And then I like that sort of storytelling. Those are my two like it factors for me. And if I'm gonna greenlight or, you know, invest in a project that is already sort of the team is the other factor for me. So if I'm not leading the team as a producer, but the team is coming to me saying, hey, will you elevate this project or distribute or market it or whatever, that team is really important. And who's on the team and what's their story? Will they, if we're in development, will they fulfill? Like, not kidding around, will they fulfill? Do they listen? You know, do they take, whether it's coaching or advice, like in how do they do that? How do they take it? Right? And how flexible are they? Because a filmmaking is a long process. So it's not gonna, what it looks like in, you know, one month of 1 year may look completely different in 2 years when you're on the other end of production and post-production. And like, how flexible is this team to sort of adapt to the landscape? So those are my big things.
100%. And also I look for like, God willing, there's someone smarter in the room than me. Because I don't want to be the smartest in the room. I want to like be, and I get so inspired. There's so many interesting creatives I've worked with, or filmmakers or people in the industry, or, you know, that just have these genius ideas. You're like, oh my God, thank God you're here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very inspiring.
Absolutely.
It raises the game. It raises everyone's level up. Let's just do one more question, because we just like blew through our time. Blah, blah, blah. Steve Crawford asks, I'm an actor who wants success based on my performances and not because of some image. Is it possible to be successful without a lot of social pizzazz? Actor.
So that is an incredibly complicated answer. So here's the thing. I think let's decouple the performance, and then the idea of social media pizzazz and branding. So you can have a brand as a performer. Marlon Brando had a brand as a performer, and he did not have no social media pizzazz because it wasn't even there, but he had a brand. So you can get down and dirty and understand what's my brand, what's my unique value proposition in the marketplace, not your type. What's the special thing that you bring to a project? And it can be your type, but it's not just your type. So understanding that is the most important thing. And that may be performance based, but there may be other things as well. A lot of people don't always get cast solely. There's a lot of talented actors out there, but the actors that really understand what they bring to a project, their unique value, even if they're not saying it out loud, but they're living it, it's embodied. They just show up differently in the room. They show up differently in so doing work around that is the first thing I would say. And that may impact not necessarily your social media, but how you network, how you talk to people, the types of directors and production companies and casting directors you reach out to. Mm-hmm. Right. And so social media is just an extension of that brand, but it is not the the holistic piece of it. And so for me, the brand is the most important because that's where you get the core of like what you want to do, who you are, and how you are an opportunity for somebody. And then you can find the right people that need your opportunity for their project versus it being scattershot. So that's how I would look at it. So it's not always, I mean, I assume you're good at performance. Mm-hmm. I assume you're a talented film. If you're in this conversation, you're on this thing, you're a filmmaker, you're working on your craft, you're doing your thing, I assume that. So it's like you understanding your value and then understanding who needs that in their projects. It's going to save you time and energy because you're talking to the right people. And the social media thing is like, meh. Now, if you're a commercial actor or you're doing branded content, the social media pizzazz is an important element of that. Mm-hmm. So you have to know, again, what kind of content you want to do. But I just want to decouple those ideas because branding can be important regardless of the social media pizzazz, if you will. So keep that in mind.
That's amazing, Joanna. And you know what's so brilliant talking to you is the way you do uncouple things that are so seemingly, of course, it's like smushed together like peanut butter and jelly, and that it isn't smushed, and that you can run your show and make your game the way you want it, not just follow along, the way it's been done.
Right. And the whole world, I did see somebody asked about COVID. I mean, look, COVID just disrupted the whole world, and your function and your success inside of this new ecosystem is your unique value proposition as an actor may not be your performance. It may be like, I am super savvy with Zoom and I can do all the script readings you need to over here. I have a home set up with audio. So like if you need an audio drama recorded, I'm your person. Mm-hmm. So these are other things that can be part of your value, right? And that, so do your work. It's not always about tech setup, but that's just an example, right? So that's why it's important to do the branding work, because that can impact not your performance. Again, I assume you're a good performer. Just like, it's just an assumption I make. Sometimes actors walk in and they're not, but I always assume if you're auditioning for me, you're going to be good at acting. So it's like, let me look at what else is happening. How do you take direction? That kind of stuff.
And if you're willing, if you're a part of, as you're saying, this type of conversation, which is about your business, then you're ready to be on about your business. You've got the craft sort of working for you.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it is, you need to do the lifting in the business. Where can people find you if they want to like tag you or ask you, but like check what you're doing?
So my company's website is filmlaunch.online. But I'm on all social platforms as Joanna Bowzer, and that's Bowzer with a Z. So you can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Facebook, and you can find me on Twitter. I'm not as active on Twitter, but I still read things. I like to read Twitter comments. To me, that's entertainment, frankly. It's like my version of reality TV. But I'm on all three platforms, so come find me, and feel free to reach out. If you have questions, I'm here to support content entrepreneurs. So whether you're an actor, a filmmaker, whatever that looks like, that's my game. So reach out.
Oh, thank you so much. This is so great. And you're just, so effective at your business. It's impressive. And thank you, New York Film Academy, for giving us this platform. And everybody be safe and vote.
Yes, please vote.
Please
Awesome.
vote. Okay, bye. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.